I'm going to stand. No, I've got to go over there. Have to make a production of it. All right. Doing some dancing a little bit? Yes? All right. Okay. What Kelley said. Thank you. Randy, you don't understand the terror of those of us at the end of the table, because as each person started talking, I keep thinking, I hope she doesn't give the same talk I'm going to give. And I hope he doesn't say the same thing that I'm going to do. And all the stuff that I've been thinking of and wrestling and redoing my talk, and my entire speech about writing a gay private detective from Saskatchewan out the window entirely. Oh well. But I got lucky. If only I had the time. I didn't actually have the time to write this talk that I'm going to give right now, because I was out writing a chapter in the new Dune book this afternoon. How many of you at the table, well, actually I know all of you at the table have heard this. I could be a writer too if only I had the time. How many of you out in the audience you're a serious aspiring writers or published writers, you want to be writers? Nobody? A little slow, okay. That's one of the things that we hear very often is, I could be a writer if only I had the time. Now, for the past couple of weeks, the Olympics has been on. You may have heard of them. We sit there and we watch these wonderful superhuman feats of the gymnastics teams doing those absurd backward things on the balance beams and contorting themselves on the rings, or the high dive people leaping off backwards and twirling in the air and plunging into the water without a splash, or that bizarre synchronized swimming stuff that I still don't get, or the Croatian women's shot put team, which is pretty amazing to watch them just throw the thing, or how about that female beach volleyball team too? That's pretty good. But as we sit on the couch or on the bed and just relax and watch all this stuff going on, as we're eating our potato chips and drinking our beer and watching this, not many of us are looking at the high dive going backward and going, I could learn how to do that if only I had that time, if only I had the time. But for some people, they think that about writing books. That you could just be a successful novelist if you just had the time. If you applied yourself, and I mean, what is there to it? You just write a sentence and then write another sentence and keep writing sentences until you've filled enough pages, and that's a book. A lot of us just don't have the time to write all those sentences, but there's really not much to it. You put your mind to it, and it's it. That's all you have to do is write a novel. How many of you saw that wonderful, wonderful movie called Get Shorty, based on Elmore Leonard's novel? John Travolta, Delroy Lindo. They're two mobster wants to take over Hollywood and make movies. There's this great scene with John Travolta and Delroy Lindo, both mobsters, and they want to write movies. And Delroy Lindo says, well, there's nothing to it. You just put words down and then hire someone else to put in all the commas and shit. This is a conversation that has actually happened to me in various forms many, many times over. It's often at a book signing when a aspiring writer, and I use the term advisedly, but an aspiring writer will just come up to me a little antagonistic and just say, I could write a novel. I've always wanted to be a writer. So then I'll say, okay, so why don't you write a novel? Well, I just don't have the time. Nobody gives me the time. Well, nobody gives me the time either. I make the time. I make it my priority to write. I spend time either early in the morning or late at night. I write books when I'm sick. I write books in the evening. I write books when there are other family obligations. When it's holidays coming around, Rebecca knows that I have to have a couple of hours every day to write, even during Christmas and New Year's, even when all the relatives are visiting, because if I don't get that time to write, I am not fit company for family events. It takes a lot of discipline. It takes a lot of practice. You spend a lot of time learning your craft. You do your research on the novels. You edit them again and again and again, and you polish the prose, and then you turn in the manuscript, and then you have to work with the publisher to get it all out, and then you have to do the promotion. And I spend all of this time getting the writing done. And in fact, on Sunday afternoon, I'm giving a talk about how to increase your writing productivity. And as I was listening to Vanessa talk, I kept thinking, I've got a tip for that. I've got a tip for that. So I do all this stuff, and then I tell a person who's come up to me at the book signing that this is how much time that I spend into writing a novel. And often I get this glazed look. And then the answer is, nah, you're just lucky. Now, if you've been watching any of the Olympics or pay attention to the Olympic athletes, almost every single case, these athletes started out when they were just little kids. They worked their butts off. They practiced every day, 7 days a week. They work during their birthdays. They work on holidays. They practice. They learn their skills. They strengthen themselves up. They perfect their routines. They practice. I don't know if you've heard when Michael Phelps won his last Olympic medal, he said, I am looking forward to not having to go swim all day, every day. That's what he does every day, is to practice and get himself ready to become an Olympic athlete. They devote their lives to training, to getting better, to beating their personal bests and then beating them again so that they can be the best. They work their way up from regional competitions to larger competitions, to national finalists, to becoming the best of the best. And even then, they still might not make the Olympic team. And if they make the Olympic team, somebody still comes in last. So even after all of that work, they still don't necessarily get a medal. So there's no automatic way of becoming a writer either. I could be a writer if I just had the time. That's just not the way it happens. You have to do the same thing. And I receive letters from other people who say, Mr. Anderson, I want to be a writer, and I want to write Star Wars books, and I want to get on the New York Times bestsellers list, and it just seems like it takes a long time and a lot of work, and I don't have time for all that. Can you tell me the shortcut? Does anybody really say that? Like, I really want to win a gold medal as an Olympic ice skating person, but I don't have the time to practice, and, I'm kind of overweight, and I really don't have any sense of balance, and ice skates are expensive, so what's the shortcut to winning an Olympic gold medal in the ice skating routine? Yeah, something like that. I've wanted to be a writer since I was 5 years old. All of my life has been focused around becoming a writer. Every class I took, every hobby I developed, all of my spare time, even when I was playing as a kid, I wasn't playing, I was playing Star Trek and making up stories with the people I was playing with. I've got a talk tomorrow afternoon called The Popcorn Theory, which is about all my years of working through becoming a best-selling writer, so I hope you'll hear that. I've got 800 rejection slips. I've got 115 books published and 23 million copies in print. I did added up the books that I've done. I've published, not just written, I've published 13 million words. It turns out, not today. I mean, it's just, I just did a chapter today. I did some number research a while ago, where I looked at how many different authors were on the New York Times bestseller list in a year. And it turns out that within a general margin of error, about the same number of authors hit the New York Times bestseller list as actually make it to the various U.S. Olympic teams. So becoming a best-selling writer is actually like making the Olympic team. It's probably about as hard. It takes as much practice and as much time. There are no shortcuts. In fact, how many of you have heard this one? I know you've all heard this one. Somebody will come up to you and say, I've got an idea for a novel. I'll tell you the idea and you write it and we'll split the money. Like the idea is the hard part. Now, I was brought up to be polite and to have manners. You're all Canadians, you're all polite and you have manners. So I haven't actually given the answer that I want to give. I'm going to give you the answer that I want to give. If somebody comes up and says, I've got an idea and why don't you write the novel and we'll split the money? I'm kind of busy right now. I've got other books that I'm working on, other contracts. But let's try this out to see how it works. But, I kind of like this prospect that you're giving me. So let's just try it out. How about if I give you an idea, because I don't just come up with one like that, and then you research the novel, you plot it, you develop all the characters, you write all of those sentences one after another for 700 pages until you fill up the book. You edit it 8 or 9 times. You sell it to a publisher. You work with the editor. You work with the copy editor. You proofread it a couple of times. Then you do all the promotion when it comes out, and I'll split the money with you. And if that works out, maybe we'll try it the other way around. And no, I'm not actually making that offer to you guys in case somebody... So I know all of you guys here are dedicated because you came out to When Words Collide. This is something that you made the choice to do. You're giving up time when, you really should all be writing, doing something writing. Not anybody can be a writer. It's not like I'm going to sit down and if I have the time I can be a writer. Like, if only I had the time, I could be a brain surgeon. I could be a financial genius like Warren Buffett if only I had the time. It takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of work. And you can become an overnight success. It just may take 20 years or more. So, thank you.
Okay, when we give workshops, when Kevin and I give workshops, I have a favorite presentation I like to give called The Myths of Publishing. And I would like to share with you one of those myths today and talk about it because of what I feel is persecution of authors on the basis of the myth. And that myth is that a good book should and can be perfect. I knew since I was a teenager that I wanted to be an author. My father was an English teacher, and because I was really, really smart, I used to grade his tests for him and his and the students' essays. And I was awesome at punctuation and spelling, and I could write a mean sentence. I could write an awesome paragraph, and man, if you write enough of those things, you've got yourself a novel, don't you?
Yes.
I could write not only an excellent novel, but a perfect novel. So I was practicing through all of my teens and 20s. And every time I would read a book, I would find errors, and I'd go, if only these people had somebody who was really professional like me. I mean, I should write to the publisher and let them know I'm available to fix their stupid product because we know that they didn't care enough to do a good job. They made mistakes. There were typos. I could have spared them the indignity of putting out a product so substandard. Well, guess what? It's not possible. And, well, I suppose it's possible if you're writing a picture book that's only 100 words long. It's possible. But novels in general, it's next to impossible to put out something that's perfect and free of errors. Some of the conclusions that people draw when reading something that has errors in it is that if the author really cared about it, it wouldn't have had errors. Well, the author cares. Or usually the author cares. Sometimes it gets blamed on the editor or the copy editor or the publisher or the typesetters. But most of those people are professionals and trying to do a good job. It is not humanly probable to have a perfect work. There are a lot of steps in writing, steps that introduce errors. A lot of authors, when they're working on their novels, end up reading it 5, 10, 15 or more times. By the time you've read it that many times through, you see what you think is there. You don't see the actual words and letters that are on the page anymore. So you read the book through lots of times. You really tried to catch those errors. There are errors that have nothing to do with punctuation or spelling. Sure, there are lots of those that get through. But there's spacing. What if the spacing between the rows is off? There are special types of editors who do what's called a layout proof, and they look for things like too much space, like a couple spaces between words, or the wrong spacing between lines, or a superscript or a subscript that got put in the wrong place. There are tons of little things that most readers, they're errors, but most readers would never even see them. There are headers and footers that can change in different sections of things, and you might miss that as a reader. It's entirely possible that you'd never know that some really careful editor went through and fixed all the errors that were in those. So it's perfect as far as you're concerned, and it looks really easy. But that's something that could go wrong. Hyphenation. You could put the hyphen in a wrong part of the word. Do all of you have memorized where you can hyphenate a word? And sometimes the word is spelled exactly the same way, but depending on how you pronounce it, is hyphenated differently. Sometimes it looks exactly like you should be able to hyphenate it at a certain spot, but there's no extra syllable there, and so sometimes you'll get this little load of letters on the next line that's not really a syllable. There's punctuation. A lot of people think they know how to use a semicolon properly. But a lot of people use it instead of an em dash, or instead of a period, or instead of pick your punctuation. There are a lot of things you can get wrong that you may think because you took an English class where the teacher taught you that maybe they got it wrong. There are style guides that will tell you what the preferred style is because not all of them agree with each other. Grammar, headers and footers, broken lines. Sometimes there will be the start of a new paragraph when it's really the middle of a sentence. Sometimes there won't be because somebody found that, but that's a mistake that can get in there. Sometimes you're supposed to start a new chapter on a right-hand page. That's what we're used to in most books. And And some publishers care about that. Some publishers don't care about that. Some people will think, hey, I caught an error. They started it on a left page. Well, maybe that's not the style of that publisher. Verb tense. You can get your verb tense wrong, and it's not necessarily a typo. It's just an error in the writing style. There are facts that can be wrong. Maybe they went through and there was a fact checker. We've had this happen in books that are nonfiction. They'll go through and they'll check all of the dates you put in there and make sure that that's really when Napoleon was born. And they'll save you from making some really stupid screw-up. You don't notice any of those things. You guys probably noticed the typos. You didn't notice that all the dates were correct. It's not electronically probable to have a perfect book anymore. Computers introduce errors that you would never suspect. Sometimes we have read it a million times and we actually have a beautiful, almost perfect copy, maybe not perfect, but as close as we can come. But the computer will put in an error somewhere. It can misread a translated file. The spell check will not catch everything. When worlds collide, oh wait, that's when words collide. Spell check is not going to catch that. Spell check is not going to catch the difference between lightning and lightening. There's lightning in the sky on that painting. Is that a ziggy-zaggy thing? Or does it fade to light blue? The spell checker is not going to know the difference. Only a human being is going to be able to tell you if you got that right. I have gone to the closet to get a shirt, but if you drop the R out of it, your spell checker still not going to find that. So you can have correctly spelled words, but have the entirely wrong word. You can have, and this is painful, even with the best of intentions, this has happened to us, you can have the wrong version of a file get published. We had the completely corrected version of something, and somebody chose the wrong file and sent it to print. All of us had worked very hard and gotten rid of, I swear, every single mistake was gone. Every one. But you'll never see that because, it never got published. The wrong version got published. And so all of those mistakes that we spent lots and lots of hours trying to take out did not see the light of day.
It wasn't me, though.
That's a different one. But yes. Okay, there may have been one Young Jedi Knight's book where I sent in the wrong version. That one was my fault. And we caught it partway through and had to call and tell them it was the wrong version, and they were a little bit upset because they had already sent it to copy edit. And yeah.
I know one publisher.
Those are valuable. You could sell them to your biggest fans. And finally, there's a cost-benefit ratio. You might be able to come close to a perfect book if you ran that past every single friend you know and every single fan who has written to you and volunteered to proofread your stuff for you. In fact, Kevin and I have recently taken to doing this with our published ebooks. We request volunteers on our site and say, we need this book read. It's got a lot of errors in it yet because we just scanned it. And so we'll get 10, 12 volunteers, all of whom catch different things. And they thought they were the best proofreader because they find things in books that are published, and they think, well, I wouldn't let something like that get through. but they all find things that nobody else found. So you can keep running it through people, but there's a cost-benefit ratio. You cannot pay enough people to make sure the books are perfect. So please, if you find an error in our books, know that we love you and care about you, are doing our best job to give you the work that you deserve and not to mess with your head and imply that you're an idiot and we can pass anything off on you. We're not trying to do that. We're working very hard to give you a good book, and please don't persecute us.
Well, I don't know about you, but I was thoroughly entertained all evening. Let's have another round of applause. So we have one more program item here in about 20 minutes. But on the 5th floor, there's socializing all evening. So please, if you're going to stay for the other panel, stay for the other panel. If you're going to socialize, go on upstairs to the 5th floor. I'm sure many of our guests will be up there able to talk to you. And once again, thank you all for coming out this weekend.